Welcome back to OTR. Our guest this week is Genesee County Sheriff Chris Swanson tried to create a state registry to bird dog animal abusers. Our lead story, the battle for control of the Michigan House heats up and the governor goes full Barbie. On the OTR panel this week, Kyle Melinn, Emily Lawler, and Simon Schuster. Sit in with us as we get the inside out, off the record.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Martin Waymire, a full-service strategic communications agency, partnering with clients through public relations, digital marketing, and public policy engagement. Learn more at martinwaymire.com. And now, this edition of Off the Record with Tim Skubick.
Thank you very much. Welcome to Studio C on this Friday morning, a pure Michigan morning. Well, we've got lots going on, and the battle for control of the House is 15 months away, and here we go with the two sides going at it. With the Democrats holding a precariously thin margin of 2 votes in the Michigan House to control that body, the Republicans have already started to recall, or at least attempt to recall, a number of Democrats. But the Democratic Speaker Joe Tate and his team is fighting back by now running commercials in 6 districts where Republicans were elected by a small number of votes. And the commercials focus on those Republicans who had a chance to spend $9,700 for every school kid in the state, but they chose to vote no on same. The targeted lawmakers include, from Jackson, Representative Kathy Schmaltz, Representative Donnie Steele from Oakland County, Representative Jim DeSena, Representative Alice St. Germain, Representative David Martin, and Representative Tom Kuhn. Political pundit Bill Ballinger concedes it's always a dicey vote not to support money for school kids. However, he adds this.
I think they're mistaken in that it's going to have the impact they're thinking and hoping it will be. It's too early.
And he thinks the targeted Republicans will explain away their no vote by pointing out to the fact that many of the pork projects in the budget were for Democratic districts, money that could have gone to students.
I think the Republican state representatives will stay that, and they have said it already. They think it is larded with pork. That is not a responsible way for the legislature to spend money on school aid. And also, the Republicans point out they barely had a chance to even read the bill.
Everybody in town knew that eventually there would be a fight over control of the Michigan House, and now both parties are proving that it's coming sooner than expected, more than a year away from the actual election. So, Emily, is anybody paying attention to this thing besides the 4 of us sitting around the table and the 148 people downtown?
Hey, everyone who saw that piece, Tim.
Yes, all 3 of them.
No, I mean, I think that obviously, there is an approach where the House could be working together with such a tight margin where they could take a bipartisan approach, but that's really not how people are viewing it. I mean, House elections happen every 2 years. It throws us into a pretty much endless cycle, frankly. And there are just a few factors that could upend things. You've got these recalls pending, although I'll say the threshold for a recall is so high that I don't think anyone's made it since they changed that law. And then you've got things like the 2 Democrats running for mayor where, Democrats could not have a majority if both of those candidates win for a brief period of time before they call special elections. But I think a lot of people are looking at the House and saying, is this a Democratic House, for the next couple cycles, or is it a Democratic House until Republicans take it next cycle?
The Speaker's nervous.
I don't know if he should be, though. If you take a look, the recalls are silly if you look at it historically. I mean, we took a look back to 2006 when Leon Drollet kind of started this whole recall thing with the tax increases of 2007. We counted 70-some recall attempts against legislators, 70 that we could find. It could be up to 80. Only 2 of them made the ballot. Only 1 was successful, and that was before they amended the recall law to make it almost impossible to do. The recalls are a distraction. I'm not quite convinced the House Republicans are behind it. I think the gun activist groups who threatened it before, when gun control was front and center, they're probably behind it, but do they have the organizational support? Shoot, they actually had organizational support up in Traverse City when they tried to get Larry Inman. They actually had an organization. They actually had money, and they couldn't do it. So if they can't do it, I think it's a distraction. If Tate's nervous, I'd be surprised.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the level of infrastructure and money and, sheer bodies that you need to spin up in such a short period of time makes this particularly difficult. And we haven't seen any evidence from the folks attempting to organize these recalls that they're actually going to do that.
Well, if it turns out that they can put their act together, it could cost the Democrats some money to protect these seats. Will you concede that point?
No, because what it does is it creates a completely new campaign cycle.
Money.
So people like Betsy Kofia, they can just start raising money immediately, and she's already a fundraising machine. So instead of actually putting them on the defensive, you actually allow them to be able to raise more money than they would otherwise. It's just a silly idea.
Well, what about the commercials, though? They say these 6 Republicans had a chance to help the school kids, and they didn't.
You know, I think it's really, really far out from an actual vote on those 6 Republicans for those commercials to have much of an impact. Perhaps there's something.
You mean Mr. Ballinger's right?
You know, Mr. Ballinger's occasionally right on this program and others. But yeah, no, I really do think that it's a little bit far out to view that as like a direct impact on elections that are happening.
You agree?
In a year and a half.
I don't know if I entirely agree with that, only because state legislative elections are generally pretty low information elections. People are often going with the top of the ticket. I mean, the trajectory right now is that we're going into a presidential election year where the candidates that are likely to be on the top of the ticket are roundly disliked by the majority of voters. And so I don't necessarily see a way of easily countering this message unless you have the money to do so. And right now, Republicans haven't demonstrated that they can counter the money that's right now being spent by an administrative account by the Democratic Party that doesn't have any disclosure. We don't know how much money they've got.
But you can counter the message. Let's not forget there will be another budget by the time we're headed into next year's primaries. So, you know, if Republicans vote for record education, that budget, that's the talking point, not the one that happened a year ago.
I actually agree with Simon, though, because the Republicans are not in a position to respond in any way. These Facebook ads are being put out by the Michigan Democratic Party, which actually has an infrastructure and is actually raising money. The Michigan Republican Party can't even raise money to put together their conference that they're supposed to have up on Mackinac Island. They've got way bigger problems than this. So the Democrats can basically just go and swing away. It doesn't really matter because the Republicans can't defend. And if they are going to defend, then they would be taking money away from their own House Republican fund, which is usually just reserved for election year activities. So it's actually causing maybe the Republicans to either respond with money that they really don't want to spend or not respond at all.
Well, let's talk about money.
Certainly. I mean, I think the headline, coming away from this is sort of an unexpected one, or perhaps quite expected, which is that Republican caucus PACs outraise their Democratic counterparts despite being the minority. At the same time, Democratic campaigns far outraise their Republican counterparts because they're the party in the majority, and you can see lobbyists and special interest money.
How you can have it both ways there.
Yeah, certainly. There's a singular PAC that represents each party's caucus in each chamber. And these are really important because in competitive swing districts, these PACs are able to spend unlimited amounts of money in general elections directly coordinating with their candidates. And so they're really powerful.
Are the Democrats sitting pretty?
I think they're doing pretty well right now. And I agree that the House Republican at-large committee raised more than the Democrats, but the individual Democratic members are doing very well. People like Betsy Kofia, who I mentioned, Carol Glanville, Jamie Churches, Fitzgerald in West Michigan. I mean, they're all raising a lot of money. Matt Hall, the House leader, is raising a lot of money. But you take a look at the people who you just showed in that piece right there. They're not raising the same amount of money as their politically competitive Democratic colleagues. And Joe Tate is doing very well with his PACs. And you take a look at his own personal political action committee, something that Jason Wentworth was good at, Lee Chatfield was good at, and the Republicans just aren't.
I gotta say, like, infrastructure-wide, when you're looking at these fundraising numbers, one question that comes up for me is, there are record-breaking numbers going to, for instance, the House Republican caucus PAC, the Senate Republicans outraised as well. But I wonder how much of that is money that's being diverted from people who typically would have donated to the Republican Party and look at it and say, maybe that's not the infrastructure I want to invest in right now. We don't know that. Those reports don't come out until a little bit later.
I think there's two important points here to go off what Emily was saying. One is that what's interesting to me is that although these large-scale donors have largely fled from the Michigan Republican Party, typically forming the bedrock of that party's fundraising, it's basically business as usual for Republican caucus PACs. But these people can only donate once a year. They don't have, they're hitting contribution limits. And so there is somewhat of a ceiling for these caucus PACs. At the same time, we've seen time and time again that these administrative accounts from the individual parties have operated as the attack dogs in legislative elections, hitting the other party hard with, pretty aggressive ads. And if Republicans can't raise the money to sort of rebut them, this is on the order of millions of dollars that Democrats will have at their disposal to attack Republican legislators heading into the 2024 that we won't see from Republicans.
All right, so my beautiful bride and I were watching TV last Saturday morning. We have no life. And on comes CNN, and there's a commercial, not a commercial, there's a story about what's going on, and who shows up at the bottom of this but Governor Gretchen Whitmer disguised as Barbie. And so why do they do that?
The communications team at the governor's office has had a great year so far.
A great year.
A great year as far as getting the governor out in national press in very real, relatable, and good terms. Some of the coverage that she's got, you just can't buy.
Let me just interject. Of all of the governors that we've seen in recent years, if you piled all of those governors together, they don't even come close to the national media attention this governor has gotten.
No, and even just in the last 6 months, I mean, the feature stories are just, from her standpoint, are great.
Vanity Fair, New York Times,
New Yorker.
Yes, New Yorker.
Atlantic.
Listen, that New Yorker thing went on for on and on and on.
It was 6,000 words. It was like a novella.
They took her from the time she was born until right up to here. It was incredible.
Unbelievable. And yeah, just the positive press is something else. Obviously, waiting in the wings, just in case something happens to Joe Biden. She could step right into a presidential race, and even if things work out well for him, she's ready to go in 28 if need be. I mean, she's just setting the groundwork, and the messaging is fantastic.
So I'm going to see Barbie tonight. You may have noticed I'm wearing all pink. But I do think that, the governor's digital team is on the younger side. I think they're keeping on top of these trends. You saw things like her putting out the video welcoming Taylor Swift to town. You saw her, I think, tweeting about Beyonce coming. Barbie does not surprise me, if only because the governor likes to have a little bit of fun. And I think when your digital team comes to you with something really fun, she's going to be game.
She said it was hilarious. Did you think it was hilarious?
I mean, I thought it was very endearing, right? It's something that's charming.
Endearing. Endearing. Simon, did you have your medicine this morning?
I think that, they're really capitalizing on the cultural moment. And this is something that I think speaks to the decline of legacy media like the folks at this table. Because of social media, they're able to communicate directly with voters, and it doesn't have to be anything substantive. They can, tie in a little bit of what they see as policy accomplishments here and there, but really all they have to do is something that's, engaging and people find entertaining and taps into these cultural moments. And then, legacy media folks like us are sort of forced to cover it because it becomes so widely popular on the internet.
Why do we bite on this all the time?
Because it's Shark Week, baby.
Yeah. Is that in the papers?
That's why we bite, because it's Shark Week. She's just so relatable, and that's why. She comes across this genuine. This doesn't look contrived. It doesn't look manufactured. It looks real. And so we love the real in the media. We love it.
All right, let's see what we can get out of the real guy who's our guest, the sheriff of Genesee County. Mr. Sheriff. Sheriff, welcome to Off the Record. It's good to see you. Nice to have you on board.
Thank you.
Let's cut to the chase. You want to go after people that are abusing animals. You talked about a petition drive. There's been crickets on the petition drive. Are you working the legislature to get lawmakers to do the heavy lift so you don't have to do the petition drive?
Well, they're certainly not crickets. It's just what people don't see is what you might be talking about. This has been a 13-month journey for me. And in being in law enforcement as long as I've been in and talking to people that are in law enforcement, when you directly connect animal abuse, neglect, and torture to what happens when people do that without any accountability, there's a 6 out of 10 shot they're going to do it to an actual vulnerable person, a child, somebody that's addicted, an elderly. And so we're pushing this. There's 2 ways to do it. You can do a ballot initiative or the legislative process. So we're kind of doing both.
Well, you're working the legislature pretty hard because you don't want to spend the money and time to do a petition drive.
Well, I'd rather spend the money on marketing the messaging than trying to get signatures. It just makes sense financially.
So you got somebody to introduce the bills?
We have a lot of interest on both sides. And
name names.
Oh, well, for their sake, I'm going to tell you, we've got both House and Senate leaders, both majority and minorities. They both love it. Did you know Winnie Brinks was raised on a farm?
No.
Yes.
did, yes.
Yes. Yes. And Mark Brewer has a pet goldfish. Yes. And so when you look at
two
people,
votes.
there you go. When you look at, Mark Brewer, who is such a voice in Lansing on both sides, and he sees the logic and the path to get there, we're going to get there. And the voters are going to be able to endorse this movement of creating a pet registry for people that abuse, neglect, torture, and beat animals to death. You've given up your right to own another animal for a period of time. And then close that civil process loophole where right now, if we take animals off the street, if the owner doesn't give up ownership, they stuck in animal controls and humane societies for up to 2 years plus. We're going to shorten that down to 22 days and get them rehomed.
Sheriff, what do you got as far as money and organization? Because you need both of those in order to launch some kind of drive. Where are you getting those from?
Well, the organization is built. We've got people from all over the state and the country. For example, we have, our civil lawyer that comes from Oakland County that used to be from Genesee County, Brooke Tucker. She's a phenomenal student of law. She wrote the language. She wrote all the language in Genesee County when she was there. Of course, having Jim Kirchner on as our public relations director. We have Alina Clark, who works for the Attorney General's office. Now, these are not part of their official duties, but that's the kind of talent we have. We have people on there from Michigan Pet Alliance. They have a vested interest, and they're part of the committee. And then, of course, the Michigan Humane Society, the animal controls, the MSA, the sheriffs. There's nobody in this field, whether you take care of animals, whether you're a breeder, whether you rescue on a Sunday afternoon in the middle of winter, they see that this is a real topic. And then when you look at what happened yesterday, starting in Oakland County during the Oxford shooting, Ethan Crumbley killed innocent animals before he killed people.
How do you make that connection? You cited a statistic about people who hurt animals going on to hurt people. Have you seen cases of that?
Absolutely. I give you first of all, Time Magazine did a great article in August of 2022. Mark Levine, I encourage you to check it out. There was a great call for accountability. And this is a national reporter, a freelance reporter that says, every judge can, have their own subjective sentence. The laws are not really substantial when it comes to the amount of penalties. But what about the accountability piece? So we have a national push to it. Then when you look at 6 out of 10 active shooters, they torture animals before they kill people. Parkland, Uvalde, and of course Oxford. When you look at what's happening here in Michigan, you see that direct connect in. We had our own personal case, which is really kind of the catalyst for this. On an Easter Sunday morning in 2022, just last year, a guy and a girl were dating. She went to go get breakfast, came back. He didn't like what she got. They got into a domestic. He pulled out a gun. He raped her. As she got done raping her, she jumped out of the window with her dog, running down the street, Facebook Living the whole thing. He chases her down, shoots and kills the dog, drags her back, and continues the physical assault. A neighbor digs a shallow grave, buries the dog. We go on the investigative manhunt. We exhume the corpse. We do a necropsy. We arrest the individual days later. We give her the voice she had, the protection. There's a direct connect. Months later, a same neighborhood, a gentleman thinks that his neighbor set him up on a domestic. He goes over to take revenge. She's not there. The Ring camera's there. Sees the 3.5-year-old puppy on a chain, just minding their business, takes out a screwdriver and stabs it 33 times, kills it. Comes back an hour later to try to kill her. There's the direct connect.
Wow.
Simon?
I'm curious, do you think that there should be a pathway for people who abuse animals to get off of this registry? And then also, another thing I'm curious about is, do you believe that people who are dealing in the pet trade, either from humane societies to professional dog breeders, should they have to consult this registry before they make a transaction?
Great questions. The pathway is already built in. There's a misdemeanor felony, multiple felonies, or habitual offender penalty. So there is a natural progression to get off the list once you're on. And really, it's a list that anybody can access. It's different than Logan's Law. It's different than the sex offender registry. It doesn't restrict where they can live, where they can do their own personal business, but they just can't go and get another animal. When you have crush video cases that we've had where they buy 30, 40 innocent companion animals and they use them to kill and monetize, we just had that case last year, they can go into pet supply stores, and now Pet Supply can actually just build a protocol and say anybody who comes in and buys animals, we're just going to check. And it's not a punitive decision if you check or don't check. It's an opportunity for you to check and to hold people accountable. And you have the autonomy to say, you know what, we're not going to sell you an animal. We're not going to work with you because you did this in this county. You've moved over here. You've been convicted of running a puppy mill over here. You're not going to do it in our county. We saw that up in Grand Traverse County. There was a prior conviction up in Grand Traverse. The sheriff raided, and you had over 100 dogs. Some were dead. Some were sleeping on others. And that same individual got convicted over on the west side of the state.
Sheriff, let's talk politics. If there's a Democratic primary for governor, could you beat Mike Duggan or Jocelyn Benson?
Boy, you are so good. Obviously my focus is the sheriff.
Why are you smiling?
Because I just love this game. I just love this environment. I love, the talent at this table is exciting. And
Sheriff,
so,
the question on the table, please.
I know it. You're like a defense attorney. Again, we've had this conversation, you and I personally, for 2 years. There's some great talent that when that seat opens up in 26, I think you're going to see a lot of people say, I could lead the state post Gretchen Whitmer. She's done a great job. And one of those could be Mike Duggan.
And one of them could be you.
Could.
Why don't you just say you want to do it?
Because obviously there's a progression. You have the sheriff race in 2024. I love my county. I love my community. It's my second election. The pet registry that we're looking at is a 2024 ballot initiative in November. That takes a lot of focus. But as I said before, if what we're doing with GHOST, our human trafficking enforcement team, we just finished our 52nd county we've worked with, Presque Isle, arrested 2 individuals. The Ignite model that we have for corrections, it's changing the way we do business in corrections. Of course, the pet registry. There's a lot of statewide initiatives that could play across the state.
So there's at least a 50-50 chance you will run.
I will tell you, I'll answer it this way. I never turn down opportunities if it could help people, because it's something that has always driven me as a police officer, as a public servant in every rank that I've had. And as the sheriff, finishing my 4th year, I've seen what people desire. They want somebody that can protect, serve, and unify, somebody who's relatable. You just talked about the Gretchen Whitmer Barbie commercial. That's why I have such a public persona, is because I tell people without restriction, without edit, who I am, what I stand for, and I show them the human side.
Sheriff, I'm curious what you're seeing in terms of crime in Genesee County. A lot of times Flint gets a bad rap because of crime. Are you seeing any trends one way or the other, or anything different going on that front?
Absolutely. We did a model of policing in July 1st of last year called Operation Arrowhead. And if you look at any downtown area of any city, even across America, that is usually the hub of the county. Detroit, the hub of Wayne, Grand Rapids, the hub of Kent, Flint, the hub of Genesee. And we had, in one weekend prior to us taking a different approach, 4 shootings, 1 homicide, 4.8 miles, the red bricks, if you ever come down to Flint. Well, I had 5 individuals that were funded by the Mott Foundation and the county, and we put 5 of the best personalities there to do problem-solving policing. Don't just treat symptoms. I've been a medic since I was 20. When I have somebody that's got multiple system failure or trauma, you triage what you can do, and then you go and you can rehab the patient. So when someone gets arrested for domestic or larceny, why do they do that? They're mentally ill, they have no shoes, they have no refrigerator full of food for their kids. So these officers, they go back and fix that problem. We've had 1 shooting in the last calendar year in that 4.8 miles. Crime has drastically reduced. You can go talk to the business owners. Don't listen to a word I say. Just watch what we've done. The downtown vibe is completely transformed. They just re-upped the funding for another entire year. That's how you transition from normal policing, traditional policing, to police evolution.
We were talking about Gretchen Whitmer getting some national press. You got national press yourself in 2020 in the wake of the George Floyd protests. And you were pretty passionate at that time about sort of changing the relationship between police and the community. What kind of progress have you seen, and how do you measure progress in that regard?
I love it. I'm going to answer your second question first. And you measure progress in our world by how people feel. Like, listen to the people. I love, stats, and I love data, but you go to the street, and that's where you get the true sense of, are you making a difference? Because perception's reality. And to get back to what happened on May 30th, 2020, it was the right thing to do. And that was one of 40 protests that entire year where people expected Flint, because of water and crime and poverty, to be what everybody else thought they would be. And we transitioned. We didn't have a single arrest. Nobody was injured. No buildings were smashed. No boards were broke. But that was a moment of what I've been my whole life, and the people expected more. And so that's what started Ignite, our education model. That's what started our county ambassador program, who you met this morning, our returning citizens that are full-time employees. John L. Allen did 29 years in prison for murder, and he's full-time employee for me. A deputy sheriff, because when he transitioned out, he's not the same as he was when he came in. That speaks volume into people, and you have to show by your actions what your words are saying. When I was hanging out at Target parking lot, I made a declaration. You know, my dad and my grandpa were both the Detroit riots, 67 and 45. I said, you know, I can't change everything. I'm not going to do nothing, but I am going to do my part, and that's what we do. It's everything. It's our Christmas spectacular. It's you know, doing things like Depths with Dogs, and it's the protection side, the service side, the unify side, and those three words are on all three sides of every patrol car in the sheriff's office in Genesee County. It's a constant reminder, and that's how I judge it, and that's how we do it.
Overtime, right?
Pardon?
You'll stay for overtime?
I'll stay all day.
All right. Simon, quick one.
I'm curious, as Tim has extracted from you, you're someone who's at least mulling statewide leadership.
That's right.
Democrats have trifecta control of state government right now. What do you believe they need to do to maintain that control?
Well, they need to keep building relationships, because the people are going to decide the control ultimately. And I found this: when you try to force something, there could be a reaction that you don't normally get. And when you look at Genesee County, we're very Democratic. And I was able to get the largest crossover vote in county history. And when you do that, now everybody, even if they have a different party, they're all walking in the same direction. You get a lot more done. I think if they continue to work with their opposition on both sides, and instead of creating division, that's what people want. I think the average person, not only in the state but around the country, you obviously have, you know, far rights and lefts, but the majority of the people are like, listen, I'm with the party of leave me alone. You know, I really just want to do my thing, take care of my family, take care of my business, and I'm tired of the fight. And
I got to interrupt.
Yeah.
Okay, hold that thought. Stay in that seat. Don't go anywhere.
I'm not moving.
You stay around too. Go to WKAR.org for our overtime segment with the sheriff. Watch these closed credits and see you on the other side.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Martin Waymire, a full-service strategic communications agency, partnering with clients through public relations, digital marketing, and public policy engagement. Learn more at martinwaymire.com. For more Off the Record, visit WKAR.org. Michigan Public Television stations have contributed to the production costs of Off the Record.